It's 2 weeks past Easter. Have you seen the risen Christ lately? Would you even recognize him when he appears to you? I'm sure some of us would, but not everyone. And this is clearly the case in our gospel today. Although our spiritual perspectives can get clouded sometimes, today's gospel gives all of us a fresh insight into how we are meant to see the risen Jesus. From John's gospel, we have another fish story set along the Sea of Tiberias to ponder. In both stories, Jesus reveals himself as the spiritual wellspring that sustains life. In the first story, Jesus feeds the disciples in a huge crowd with only 2 fish and some barley loaves. In today's gospel, there's no crowd and only a few disciples, but this time there's a stranger on the shore cooking fish and warming some bread on the fire. As the story goes, Peter tells his friends, "I'm going fishing." Now, rather than being left alone on the dark shore, his companions tag along. After another long night on the boat, their nets are still empty. Their backs and hearts ache, and they were very hungry. Now, it was near dawn as they were coming into the shore, but still too dark to see clearly. Then the stranger on shore calls out to them, "No luck tonight, huh, boys?" Then he said, "Try throwing your nets over the other side of the boat." I can only imagine what they were thinking. Who the heck was this stranger telling the Rock and the Zebedee boys how to fish these waters? As if they hadn't tried everything already. And I doubt that even Thomas could contain his frustration. For some reason, though, they cast the net where the stranger suggested, and it was soon filled to capacity. Now, we all have fish stories to tell, but this catch could have been the fish story of the ages for Peter and his friends. But Peter and his friends, though, are still grieving over the loss of their rabbi. They just couldn't connect the dots yet at this time and place. In Peter's mind, the person standing by the fire on the shore is just a stranger. All of this is so vividly symbolized by them fishing at night. Today's gospel is jam-packed with rich symbolism and metaphor, and mysterious manifestations like the moment their nets broke the surface of the water. Before that, they were indifferent. They couldn't see the fish that were always nearby. With the stranger's assistance, though, the fish are suddenly revealed and ready to be drawn in. Now, I don't know about you, but if you tried drawing a heavy net with nearly 153 fish, large fish that is, bursting that net, it'll always exceed our capability. So until we realize our limitations and know when to ask for help, we may never recognize, let alone see the stranger, even when he's standing right in front of us, offering to make our lives easier. The question then is, who can actually see this way? Well, it doesn't seem to be Peter or his companions. But if we look closely at today's text, it says, "The disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, 'It is the Lord.'" Now that disciple is one who always lives in the moment, always looking out for others, always conscious of being loved by God in Jesus Christ. That disciple is one whom I would argue is the beloved disciple, and she is Mary Magdalene. I believe it was her role to remind the so-called established leaders that God's ubiquitous presence is too often overlooked. It was her irrefutable fidelity to Jesus that finally ignited a spark of recognition in Peter. Let me offer one more thought about Mary Magdalene before continuing. For most of our Christian history, we paid little attention to the presence of the women at Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. And for years now, we've been told mostly by male theologians and clerics and other so-called gospel experts to pay more attention to the men. But by doing this, we miss the faithfulness of these women and focus instead on the faithlessness of the men. In reality, Mary Magdalene and the other women were the first witnesses to the resurrection because they remained present for the entire process, from death to new life. My friends, if we are to witness resurrections in our own lives, then like Peter, we need to listen to and be shepherded by the likes of Mary Magdalene, whose life is an authentic testament of faith and love for Jesus Christ, who is forever with us. When the risen Jesus invites his friends to breakfast on shore, it symbolizes a new way of understanding for them, just as it should for us. And despite our past doubts and denials, hopefully we'll realize that Jesus isn't in a tomb anymore, but instead anchored in our rediscovered relationships with him. The key, I think, to life and love, peace and happiness can be found or recovered and even relearned if we welcome the risen Christ into our lives in this kind of manner. To live for God means we must live with like-mindedness to the truth of the risen Jesus Christ, who lives in and sustains everything in our cosmos. Theologian Ilia Delio writes, "We can cry with those who are mourning, with the forgotten, with those who are suffering, with the weak and with the imprisoned. We can mourn in the solidarity of compassion, but we must live in the hope of new life. For we are Easter people, and we are called to celebrate the whole earth as the body of Christ." My sisters and brothers, this is the wisdom of the resurrection, but it's not easy to discern. It becomes more evident, though, in the light of Christ, who invites us to see from a totally different perspective, and who insists we reach out to the stranger until we can recognize Christ in the face of every person we meet. So just as it was for Peter, our insight can also be renewed on that Easter shore. There, as dawn breaks into our lives, we will see the risen Christ ready to feed us warm bread and fish. My friends, never be afraid to look around you to see who is nearby. Trust in the words of the disciple whom Jesus loved. Then you will know it is the Lord.